everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my August and September wrap up. I never did an August wrap up because I was on holiday at the end of August. By the time I got back it was into September and it was just too late to do one. So I just decided, let's just put all the books I read in August and September together and just do them in one wrap up video. So I am going to have to use my phone because I read quite a lot of Kindle books and audio books whilst I was away, so you can kind of see the stack here. The physical stack isn't massive, and if I don't use Goodreads I'm not going to remember at all what it is that I actually read. So the first book I read in August, I started it at the end of July, finished it beginning of August, was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is a fantasy book, but it's quite like a cozy, slower pace, like just kind of following the character kind of vibe fantasy book. I don't feel like this camera is actually straight. Is it? Honestly, I just don't know. Is the camera even... I don't know. Anyway, regardless, let's continue. It's a slower paced fantasy book where you just kind of follow Emily Wilde looking for some fairies. But it had a lot more plot than I expected, to be fair. I thought it was going to be quite a lot slower than it was, but it was actually quite fun. There was quite a lot going on. She is just looking for fairies, but it's not boring. Like, I found it really just... I don't know, I just loved the vibes. I loved the atmosphere of the book. A lot better than I thought. I went in with not too many expectations, but I ended up giving it a 4-star. I really liked it, and I've already got the second one on audio ready to listen to. And I'm quite excited for it. As I said, I just love the vibe. Like, it's just such a nice... I don't know, I was going to say happy vibe, but it's not always a happy book, like sad things do happen. But it's, I don't know, it's just like a nice spring kind of vibe, even though I didn't read it in the spring. That's just what it makes me think of. The next book I read, again I don't have a physical copy, I've read it on my Kindle, was Addicted After All. This is part of the Addicted Calloway Sisters series, and it is one of the books that is in Lily and Lo's perspective. I don't hate Lily and Lo, but they're not my favourite couple in that series, so I went into this book with very low expectations. And I gave it a 4. I always loved Lily. I feel like Lily has been done so dirty in this series. She's been written very immature, and I always hated that because she's got an addiction, but they're writing her as if she's a child, but she's not a child. She's a struggling adult, and I never understood why they wrote Lily, I don't know, just so young sounding. I feel like it really didn't do justice to her character, and I don't know how to describe, because like Lo has an addiction but they don't write him as if he's a child. I feel like they make Lily seem like she's just stupid all the time, and she isn't, and I always hated that. But I felt like that got a bit better in this book, and I actually really liked being back in Lily and Lo's heads. I think I've given their other books like 3.5 stars. I didn't hate them, but I just wasn't necessarily looking forward to another book in their perspective. But I ended up giving this a 4. I really liked it. I don't dislike Lo as much as I used to. I don't dislike Lo, but I do find him annoying. I can't lie. And I know people are going to hate me for that. But I just don't love Lo like a lot of people do. But I really, really like Lily. Like, after this book specifically, I've got even more of a soft spot for Lily than I already had. The next book I read I actually do have a physical copy of, and it is Reckless. This is the second/third book in the Powerless trilogy. It's the second full-length novel, but there is a novella between the first book and this one. I liked the first book, I gave it 4 stars. It didn't quite live up to the hype, but I think that's because it was so like hyped up that I went into it with very high expectations, and it's not that it didn't meet them, but I just wasn't completely obsessed with it. Read the novella, I think I gave that like 3.5, and then went into this one. I didn't dislike this. I gave it a 3.75, so obviously I didn't think it was bad. That's quite a high rating, but I found it very cyclical and quite repetitive. It was like reading an episode of, like, how can I best describe it? It was kind of like reading an episode of Tom and Jerry. Like, just chasing each other, running away, oh, we're back together again, and oh, now one of us is doing this and this and this. Like, it was just a bit like, we're doing the same thing over and over again. And then it ended on, like, yet another, like, obviously it's going to end on a cliffhanger because there's another book, but it was just like the same kind of cliffhanger. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Obviously I don't want to spoil the end of this for anyone that's not read it, but it's just like, let's do something different. Like, can we just do something a bit different? It was just so like, they were just walking around the whole time and like trying to get away from each other and then they're back together. It was just, and as I said, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed their interactions. I like that Kai and Paden spent a lot of time together in this book. I do. But it was just like, let's do something different. It just got quite repetitive. But yeah, I didn't dislike it. I feel like I've just said everything negative about it. I like the banter. I like the interactions between them. It was just, I don't need it to happen like necessarily this many times throughout the whole book. But yeah, 3.75, so definitely not bad, just not quite what I was expecting. I expected more to happen in this book to drive the overall plot of the series forward than it actually did. The next book I read, again, I don't have a physical copy of, I listened to it on audio. Three Sisters by Heather Morris. It's part of the Tattooist of Auschwitz series. I don't want to say too much about this book. I read it in a video. Which video did I read it in? It was in my 24-hour readathon video. Yes, that has gone up before this. I talked about my feelings on this book in there. Basically, I don't know how to feel. I don't want to talk about it too much. It's complex. I didn't rate it, so we're just going to move on. I'm not saying it's a bad book at all. This isn't anything against the author, by the way. It's just, I think I've read this at a bad time, considering like current events in the world. So, moving on. The next book I read on Kindle, and it's Luna and the Lie by Mariana Zapata. I was quite surprised by this one. I love Mariana Zapata's books, but they can be quite hit and miss in that I didn't like her newest release, Gracie and the Grunt. I found that one really quite boring. Then I love like her middle backlist, like From Lukov with Love is my favourite romance book ever. All Roads Lead Here, Wall of Winnipeg, all those kind of, that era, like Culte, all those kind of books. Loved all of those, gave them all like 4.55 stars. But then her backlist, like Underlock, Lingus, that era, don't like them at all. And Luna and the Lie is an older book. I think in my head it definitely sits in that camp of like her first books. I don't actually know when it was released. I don't know if it was one of her first books, but it goes in that older category. So I went into this with very low expectations. I read it because I want to read all of Mariana Zapata's backlist because I do love so many of her books. Again, like her middle release ones. But I gave it 4 stars. I just really clicked with the main character. It did take a while. I read this in a vlog as well. I can't remember which one. It did take a while for me to click with the main character because, as always, Mariana Zapata doesn't give much away about the lives of her characters at the beginning of the book. So it takes time to learn like who the characters are and what they're all about. But once I did, I just really loved Luna. She is one of the strongest, most resilient humans I have ever read about. She's definitely had a very hard life. There are definitely a couple of trigger warnings for this book, so I would look those up if you were interested in reading it. Basically the premise is, I've not really told you the premise of many of these books because a few of them are like in series, but this is a standalone. So basically we've got Luna. She works in a car garage. She helps like paint the cars. She helps out with the mechanics when they need her to. Blah blah blah. And Ripley is one of her bosses. She has 2 bosses. Ripley is one of them. They don't get on at all. She doesn't like the way that he manages. She doesn't like him as a person, but you can always kind of tell she's got like a bit of something. Like, she doesn't like who he is, but there's just something in the way that she talks about him and describes him, you can kind of tell, like, I think she's got a bit of a crush. But obviously it's her boss. She's like, no, it's never going to happen. Like, she never even considers it. She never even thinks about the fact that she has a bit of a crush on him, because it's like, it's not going to happen. I don't like him as a person, and he's my boss. And then obviously a romance ensues. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to obviously spoil anything, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really liked them together, and I really just love Luna as a character. The next book I read was The Summit of Broken Rules. I read this in a vlog again, so I won't talk about it for too long, but basically the premise of this is that we've got what she called Meredith. Meredith and her family go to Martha's Vineyard. Is that how you... The book is set on Martha's Vineyard. They go there every summer with all of like the family and the family friends, This year is difficult because Meredith, her sister Claire, has passed away, and it's their first year going back without Claire, so it's definitely got like an undertone of grief. It is talked about quite a lot, so obviously do bear that in mind if you are interested in reading this and haven't already, because I think most people have read this book by this point. It's not new. Anyway, so they go back to Martha's Vineyard, and this year there is a wedding. Meredith's cousin is getting married, so as well as all like the usual family, there's also the groom's family and friends there as well. So she's meeting, oh, why does it keep going in and out of focus? It's probably because I'm waving my hand around. That's probably why. But anyway, she meets loads of new people, one of whom is, what's his name? Whit? What's this boy's name? Whit. His name's Whit. She meets him, and he isn't he the groom's stepbrother, I think? Guys, it's been a while now since I read this, but anyway, they're at this wedding. So it's got like the fun summer vibes, it's got wedding vibes, and also my favourite part about this is that the whole wedding party, like everyone that's there, and there's like quite a lot of people there, they play like a massive game of assassin that kind of runs throughout the book. So you've got the romance, you've got the wedding vibes, the summer vibes, and then you've got this really fun game of assassin that I was worried I'd find that boring, but it actually really helps move the plot along and adds like just a more light-hearted kind of vibe to the book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, and I've already purchased the next book by this author, and I'm so excited to read it because I just really enjoyed this one. Next book I read on my Kindle, Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. 2 stars. Do they even know each other? They built it up that they are the loves of each other's lives. They met once. They spent one day together. On that one day, they both had other partners. Yes, they didn't cheat, but like they kind of did though, didn't they? Like, yeah, they didn't like physically, they didn't like kiss or anything, but you crossed some lines. So I already didn't like either of the characters. I found them really boring, really annoying. Like, you had a boyfriend and he had a girlfriend. You knew you were crossing boundaries and lines. Anyway, so we see that happen. It's like a then and now. And then in the present day, they're at this resort that she now owns. I don't even know her name, nor do I care. She now owns this resort because her mum has passed away, and he turns up at the resort. And that's the present day. But I just feel like the romance is lacking. You spent one day together 10 years ago when you both had other partners, and now he's turned up and you expect me to believe that's the love of your life. The romance isn't developed in the present day, nor was it developed in the past, because you were in other relationships and you met for one day and then never spoke again. I just thought the premise didn't work. The romance wasn't built up in either the past or the present timeline. Didn't enjoy. Moving on. Next one was Until I Met You by Amber Rose Gill. It's definitely insta love, definitely like a bit cringe, not my kind of romance book, but it ended up just being quite fun. One thing I loved about this was the setting. The descriptions and the setting was very well written. I could really feel my main problem, well, that's a lie, it wasn't my main problem. I had so many problems with Meet Me at the Lake. One of the biggest problems for me with Meet Me at the Lake was that I couldn't picture where I was, because they barely described any of this resort. They made it up to be this like big beautiful place, and I couldn't picture any of it. Very different to this one. I could picture the setting of this so well. It was so well described, really kind of encapsulated those summer holiday vibes. It was just the writing was a bit over the top, like everything was very in your face, nothing to work out or deduce. You were told everything, which sometimes is nice, but I don't know, I like a bit of tension. The tension was broken very early on between, when I say tension, I mean between like the love interests. Even if it's not negative tension, it could be like you're flirting but you don't know when to cross the line. I just like a bit of like will they, won't they. There was none of this in here, it was just they will. Like we know, I mean, they just will. But it ended up being fine. I gave it 3 stars. I wouldn't say it was a bad book. I wouldn't also say to put it at the top of your TBR. It's not the best of romance books, but I already owned it. It was fun, it was good to read on holiday, and yeah, it was fine. I didn't hate it. Next one was another Kindle read, Fuel the Fire, which again is in the Addicted Calorie Sisters series. This one is from the perspective of Rose and Connor, and they are my least favourite couple. it goes Racking Daisy, Lillian Lowe, Rose and Connor. So I wasn't looking forward at all to being back in their heads. Like with Lillian Lowe, I wasn't dreading it, I just wasn't excited about it. I was borderline dreading reading this book because I love Rose and Connor as characters in the other books. I just don't enjoy being in Connor's head. I find it uncomfortable being in his brain because his brain just doesn't work like anyone else's brain that I've ever read from the perspective of. But one thing I did love about this book was that we really saw a more vulnerable side to Connor. I found it quite hard to get on board with him in the other books because he's just like this otherworldly thing. Like, not literally, he is just a human. These books aren't fantasy or anything if you don't know. But I just saw a different side to him in this book. I feel like we got his vulnerable side. We got to see a lot more of the depth of Rose and Connor's relationship. I always believed in their romance anyway. I think they are perfect for each other. But we really got to see more depth in the characters and in the romance. So I did appreciate that. And I gave it 3 stars. Next one, another Kindle read, A Love Letter to Whiskey. And I read the 5th anniversary edition. So the one with the white cover that has the extra chapters at the end. For quite a lot of this book, I was like, this is a 5-star. I was reading it for like over half the book thinking, yeah. Even though it's got every trope I hate, it's got the cheating trope. So bear that in mind, I hate the cheating trope. But kind of like with Magnolia Park, something about it was just working. Like, I wasn't hating it. And then it just kind of went downhill, like with every conflict that happened, with every time they fell out, I was like, maybe you shouldn't be together. Like by the end of the book I was like, I can't decide, and I still can't decide now, if they are soulmates or if they should have just accepted that the universe has given them so many signs that they shouldn't be together. It's like, is this resilience or stupidity? I still can't decide, so I gave it a 3 stars. I went in the middle. I enjoyed reading this book, but just towards the end I was like, seriously, another barrier, another roadblock. Like, can we just work this out, please? It was exhausting by the end. But yeah, 3 stars. I did enjoy the process of reading it. I was exhausted by the end of it. Next one I read was a very anticipated read for me. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I would read this woman's shopping list. I love Ali Hazelwood. Am I saying she's the best writer of a generation? No. But I love her books. I love the humour that she weaves throughout every single one of her books. Bride, obsessed. Checkmate, obsessed. I've really been loving her newer releases. I also like the old ones, like Love on the Brain. Oh my god, what's it called? How can I forget? The Love Hypothesis. How can I forget what that's called? They're like 4-star reads, really solid. But Checkmate was like 4.5. Bride was a 5. And Love Theoretically kind of comes between those chronologically. It came just before Bride, I think. I think this was her last STEM book before she moved into like some other stuff. I think her newest one is also STEM. Anyway, irrelevant. So I went into this with very, very high expectations. A lot of people love this and say that it's like Ali Hazelwood's best book. I didn't dislike it, okay? But, as I said, I like tension between the main characters. And I felt the tension was broken. Not... I don't want to say too early. It wasn't on page like 50 or anything. I don't actually know when it was. It might have been early, I can't remember. I just didn't like how... What's she called? Elsie. I didn't like how Elsie found out that Jack liked her. There was no guessing, no working out how he felt on like Elsie's side. And I just don't like that. I like it when there's a bit of guessing. Again, I like a bit of will they, won't they. How can she not see this? Like, I like it to just, I don't know. And I just didn't get that here. So I gave it a 3.5. I like the characters. I like them together. I just would have preferred, I don't know, just a bit more back and forth about the romance. And also the whole, like, the premise of this, by the way, is that Elsie is fake dating Jack's brother. She has like a side job, because obviously you don't get paid very well in the early days of being a scientist. So she has like a side job where she fake dates, and she's fake dating Jack's brother. So there's a bit of tension there. And then that ends pretty quickly into the book, very amicably. They stop fake dating. And then Jack's just like, oh yeah, I fancy her. And it was just a bit, I don't know, a bit anticlimactic for me. I just wish there was a bit more working out how he felt. But yeah, 3.5. I always enjoy the process of reading an Ali Hazelwood book, but I just wish there was a bit more. I don't know. The next one I read was Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. I've had this one for quite a while and I don't know why I put it off. It's only a short read. This is a book about many different things. It's a book about romance, but it's not like a typical romance story. It's a book about the experience of being black. It's a book about many different things. It's just kind of basically following this character's life. Not whole life. It's not like a massive span of time. But it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It is just following like a period of his life where in that period he happens to fall in love. He experiences some really horrific, like racist, like acts and experiences, both directly to him and friends and family. So it's about all of those things. It was sold to me, not by like the person in the shop, by the internet as a romance book. I wouldn't classify this at all as a romance book. It's about so much more than that. And even when it's talking about the romance, it's about the experience of falling in love and the intricate feelings of that. And again, the experience of being black. Obviously I can't relate to the experience of being black because I'm white. So it was very interesting to read from that perspective in such like a raw way. It's a very raw book. It's not sugar coated. It's just very real. The thing I struggled with is that it's written in second person point of view, and I found that quite hard, therefore, to connect with the book. It was definitely an interesting choice by the writer. I see why they did it. It just, because I've got a very, very literal brain, when the writer's telling me like, you did this, you said that, you thought this, I'm like, my brain is just automatically like, oh, but I didn't know. I didn't fall in love with that person, or I didn't look at that person and think that. I've never met that person. It's hard to get it across to my brain that we don't need to be literal about this. So therefore I found it quite hard to click with the book. But the messages and the story is so important, and I'm really glad I read it. I just, personally for me, the second person point of view took me out of the story rather than put me into it. And I think the intention was obviously to make you feel more part of it. Just for me, it didn't do that because of my brain. We've only got 2 books left. I finally read Funny Story by Emily Henry. I've been putting this off because I didn't love Happy Place. I didn't hate it. I think I gave it a 3.5. I enjoyed the process of reading Happy Place. It was a really fun read. I just didn't love it. It wasn't my Emily Henry book. My Emily Henry book to date is Book Lovers. I just love that book. It's the one of hers that I click with the most, and I just love that book. So I was very nervous to read this because obviously before this, Happy Place was a newest release, so I was really worried, like, am I not going to like Emily Henry's new books? Was it a one book wonder kind of thing? No, it wasn't. This is a 5-star, babes. I don't know why the camera just cut off. That was very rude. I think I am Daphne and Daphne is me. Not exactly the same. She has a very difficult relationship with her dad. I don't. I get on very well with my dad. But just her whole thing of like feeling like she has to live to please others and has to, I don't know, just, it's hard to describe because I just feel like we're the same person. Right, basically, let me tell you what the book is about. We've got Daphne and we've got Miles. Daphne's fiance leaves her for Miles's girlfriend. So that obviously leaves Miles and Daphne single. Daphne has nowhere to live because Miles's now ex-girlfriend moves in with Daphne's now ex-fiance. So Daphne ends up moving in with Miles because she has nowhere else to go. Because basically she's moved to this town with her ex-fiance, obviously he wasn't her ex at the time. And she's just kind of absorbed his life. His friends, his hobbies, it's his house, her name isn't on the house, he owns it. So she's kind of just slotted herself into his life rather than making a life for herself. And she always just kind of feels like, I don't know, it seems like she feels like a side character in her own life until they break up and she realises like she doesn't have a life of her own. she was just living like as a side character in his life. So she also has a complicated relationship with her dad. She doesn't really know like how and when to assert herself and say like, no, you're not treating me right, fix it or get out. And just seeing her growth and seeing her just grow into an independent person whilst falling in love with Miles. Stunning, beautiful, obsessed. As I said, I don't relate on like I'm very lucky that I have a good relationship with my dad, but I can apply how she feels in the scenario with her dad to so many other like friendships and relationships that I've had in the past, where I just didn't know how and when to turn around and be like, you're not treating me right, either improve or bye. Oh, I love this book so much. 5 stars, obsessed. I was worried going in as well that I wasn't going to be convinced by the romance, because they were kind of just forced to live together. I was worried that it would feel like they were together out of convenience, but to me it doesn't. They are perfect together. Just obsessed. Obsessed. I could talk about this book all day, so I'm just going to shut up and move on. Last book I read this month was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I've owned this again for a very long time. I've been putting it off because I've been intimidated by it, but I finally read it and finished it the other day. And I gave this a 3.75. Again, this was one of those books that I was reading it like first maybe, I don't know, 100, 150 pages. I was like, this could be a 5-star. Like, I'm really loving this. The premise is that we've got Rin, who is a war orphan and has been adopted by this horrible, horrible family that basically just treat her like a slave. They treat her awfully. So when she has an opportunity to get out, she takes it, because her adoptive family are trying to force her to marry this man that is a lot older and he's like gross and horrible. They're basically trying to marry her off so that they don't have to care for her and like pay for her anymore. And she doesn't want to do that. So she has the opportunity to take this test. Usually the test is only taken by very wealthy children who have like trained their entire life to take and pass this test. And if you pass it, you get to go to an academy. There's loads of different academies. And depending how you do on the test, you can go to one of these academies. And I'm actually going to leave it there. I don't want to spoil anything more, but she takes this test and then you just follow her life after she does that and how that goes and what the outcome is and yeah, what her life looks like after that. The reason it wasn't a 5-star is because I just wasn't obsessed with the direction that the book took after that like 150, 200 page mark. I felt like we didn't stay in any one place for very long. It felt like we were just glossing over the surface of quite a few different scenarios and different places without really stopping and building on the characters and the story in any one place. I just felt like almost too much happened in this book. It is quite a long book. I felt like we could have made the book a little bit shorter and just took out some of the things that happened and just stripped it back a little bit. I don't want the book to be slow and boring, but I just wanted a bit more depth rather than having loads of different scenes with loads of different stuff happening. I just wish we had a bit more depth and we delved into different scenarios a bit more. But I did enjoy it. I do plan to carry on with the series. I'm excited to see where it goes. But yeah, this one in particular was a 3.75. And they are all the books that I read in the months of August and September. Thank you so much for watching this video. I apologise it was a bit long. I don't think anyone wants to listen to me for this long. But if you are still here, thank you very much. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!